My boyfriend said, "My ex is coming to our party. Be cool or it's over." I replied, "I'll be very cool." Then I handed her a drink and said, "He's all yours." The party ended the moment I walked out. When he said that to me, it didn't even sound real at first. I thought he was joking. Who says something like that to their girlfriend? No, to anyone. But Ryan didn't laugh. He didn't even look up from his phone. He just scrolled, thumb flicking across the screen like he was swiping my feelings away. I remember the faint hum of the refrigerator behind me, the smell of burnt toast still hanging in the kitchen, the way my heart thudded once and then went perfectly still. Be cool or it's over. He'd said it as if I were the problem. As if inviting his ex to our home wasn't already the emotional equivalent of lighting a match over gasoline. I wanted to ask why. Why she needed to be there. Why I had to be the one tested. But I didn't. I'd learned long ago that asking questions around Ryan was like handing him a weapon. He'd twist it, turn it back on me, and I'd end up apologizing for something I never did. So I just said, "Sure, I'll be cool." And I meant it, though maybe not in the way he expected. We'd been together a little over 2 years. When we met, he was all spark and ease, that kind of effortless charisma that made you feel lucky just to be noticed. I fell fast, harder than I should have. Ryan made me feel like the most interesting person in the room, until one day he didn't. It started small. The casual comments about my outfits, the subtle digs disguised as jokes. The way he'd disappear for hours and come back smelling like someone else's perfume. Then came the night I found the messages from Mia. Nothing explicit, but intimate. Too many inside jokes, too many late-night timestamps. He said it was just catching up, that she'd reached out to him first. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Because sometimes loving someone isn't about trust. It's about the lies you're willing to live with. But when he told me she was coming to our party, something inside me finally cracked. The week leading up to it, I could feel the tension living under my skin. I cleaned the apartment until my hands smelled like bleach. I arranged fairy lights, polished the glasses, and smiled like a hostess in a magazine. He watched TV while I worked. On Friday night, I stood in front of the mirror, curling my hair, telling myself I'd be fine. The reflection looked calm, even confident, but my stomach was twisting. What kind of man needs his ex at his own party to feel powerful? What kind of woman stays anyway? Apparently, the kind I'd become. When the first guests arrived, I switched into autopilot. I greeted people, poured drinks, laughed at jokes I didn't hear. The music was loud, the room full, and for a while I almost forgot. Then the doorbell rang. It was her. Mia was everything I expected her to be. Tall, polished, that effortless kind of pretty that makes you instantly self-conscious. She had a bottle of red wine in one hand and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ryan moved faster than I'd ever seen him move. He crossed the room and pulled her into a hug that lasted too long. Long enough for the chatter to dip slightly. Long enough for my heart to catch on the edge of it. They talked like old friends, voices close, laughing softly. I stood there, a glass in my hand, pretending to check my phone. Every second of it burned. Someone beside me, Ryan's coworker, I think, made small talk, but I barely heard. My focus was locked on him. On the way he leaned toward her. On the way his eyes lit up in a way they hadn't for me in months. Then he looked at me. That smirk, the one that always came before he said something cruel but disguised as teasing. He mouthed, "Be cool." And something in me snapped into perfect calm. I walked into the kitchen. The noise of the party dulled behind me like someone turned down the world's volume.
I poured 2 glasses of wine, hers and mine. My hands didn't shake. They should have, but they didn't. When I came back out, she was sitting on the couch, laughing at something Ryan had said. He was watching me now, probably expecting a scene, the jealous girlfriend moment he could later use against me. I smiled instead, walked right up to her. "Hey," I said, holding out the glass. "You must be Mia. I've heard so much about you." Her eyes flickered, surprise, maybe guilt. "Oh, you must be—" "Yeah," I said, "the current one." A few people turned to look. The air thickened, heavy and expectant. I handed her the glass, raised mine, and smiled wider. "He's all yours."
The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was sharp. Ryan's face drained of color. I took a slow sip, set my glass down, and added quietly, "You wanted me to be cool, so I'm being cool." Then I walked to the door. No one said a word, not even him. The night air hit me like freedom. I didn't even grab my jacket. I just kept walking, past the cars lined along the curb, past the laughter echoing faintly behind me. My heart was beating steady, too steady, as if my body hadn't realized what I'd just done. When I reached my car, I sat inside, hands on the wheel, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding for weeks. My phone buzzed, once, twice, then nonstop. "Ryan, where the hell are you going?" "Ryan, come back, you're overreacting." "Ryan, don't make a scene." I turned it face down, let it buzz until it stopped. Through the windshield, the streetlights blurred. Somewhere between anger and relief, I started laughing. Quiet at first, then harder, until tears burned my eyes. Because it was done. I'd finally walked out. I didn't know where to go, so I just drove. The city blurred past, neon signs, strangers, midnight air that tasted like rain. I ended up at my sister's apartment, sitting in the parking lot until I could trust my voice not to shake. She opened the door, half asleep, hair messy, eyes confused. "Are you okay?" "I left him," I said. Her face softened instantly. "What happened?" I shrugged, and for the first time I felt weightless. "He invited his ex to our party, told me to be cool." She blinked. "You're kidding." I smiled faintly. I was cool. I spent the night on her couch. The hum of her old ceiling fan filled the silence while I stared at the shadows on the wall. For years, I'd convinced myself I was lucky to have him, that I needed to try harder, be easier, quieter. But that night I realized something simple and cruel. Love shouldn't make you feel small. My phone was still lighting up on the table. Messages, missed calls, voice notes. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what they'd sound like, apologies wrapped in blame, sweet words dipped in poison. Around 3 a.m. I finally opened one. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You think you're better than me now? Fine. Stay gone." I smiled, a tired, broken smile. Because somewhere deep down I'd been waiting to see that version of him in daylight. The one who wasn't charming or witty, just mean and afraid. The next morning I checked social media. Pictures from the party had already started showing up. Half-cropped smiles, bad lighting, the usual chaos. But then I saw the comments. Someone had written, "What happened after she left? It got weird." Apparently, after I walked out, the room went silent. Ryan tried to play it off, said I was just being dramatic, but people weren't buying it. Mia left 10 minutes later. The music stopped soon after. The party, the one he'd planned for weeks to prove how perfect we were, ended the moment I closed that door. Lying on that couch, sunlight spilling through the blinds, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. I didn't know what came next. The breakup fallout, the gossip, the awkward explanations to mutual friends, it would all come. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of any of it. I'd spent so long trying to be the version of myself he could love that I forgot who I actually was. And all it took was one humiliating sentence. "Be cool or it's over." to finally remind me what my limits were. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't revenge. It was release. And that's how the first night ended, with me free, somewhere between heartbreak and rebirth, knowing there was no going back. By the time I woke up, the light in my sister's apartment was soft and yellow. She was already gone for work, and the city outside sounded too normal for what had happened the night before. For a second, I almost forgot. Then I saw my phone glowing on the coffee table, 23 missed calls, 13 new messages, and the memory hit like a wave. I brewed coffee, sat cross-legged on the couch, and scrolled through them. Apologies, accusations, the predictable cycle. You overreacted. You embarrassed me. I shouldn't have said that. Just come talk to me. There was one voice note. I hesitated, then pressed play. His voice cracked halfway through, the same way it always did when he tried to sound sincere. You made your point, okay? Just come home. Home. That word didn't mean the same thing anymore. I put the phone face down, poured more coffee, and stared at the ceiling fan until the dizziness passed. Somewhere between the buzzing silence and the bitter coffee, it sank in. I didn't owe him an explanation. I didn't owe him anything. The next few days blurred together. I called in sick at work, told my boss I caught something. In truth, I just didn't want to see people's faces, didn't want to answer questions. My sister checked in, brought takeout, and pretended not to notice how much I avoided mirrors. When I finally stepped outside, it was raining. That soft, cold kind that smells like metal. I walked aimlessly through the city, phone on silent, umbrella forgotten. Every shop window reflected a version of me that looked slightly different. Calmer, smaller, freer. Somewhere along the walk, I realized I hadn't cried yet. Not really. Not when I left the party. Not when I read his messages. But then I passed a couple holding hands, laughing under one umbrella, and the tears just came. Not loud, not ugly, just steady. A quiet unfreezing of everything I'd been carrying. It wasn't about missing him. It was about missing the person I used to be before him. The woman who didn't second-guess her worth every time someone else entered the room. That night he showed up. I heard the knock before I saw his car parked across the street. My sister was still at work. I opened the door halfway, enough to see him but not enough to let him in. He looked wrecked, eyes bloodshot, shirt wrinkled. His charm had finally run out. "Can we talk?" he said. There's nothing left to say. He rubbed the back of his neck, the same nervous tick I used to find cute. Look, I messed up. I shouldn't have said that, okay? I was just trying to prove that you could control me? I interrupted. He blinked, thrown off. No, I didn't think you'd actually leave. That part almost made me laugh. He'd spent months pushing, testing, seeing how far I'd bend. It never crossed his mind that I'd break the pattern. I wasn't leaving you to teach you a lesson, Ryan, I said. I was leaving because you stopped being safe. He looked genuinely lost. Safe? Yes. Safe. Yes! Safe to talk to, safe to love, safe to be myself around. I stepped back, hand on the door. You turned every conversation into a threat. You made everything conditional. He exhaled sharply, eyes wet now. So that's it? After everything? That's it, I said softly. You told me to be cool. I finally am. And I closed the door. He stood there for another minute, maybe two, before walking away. I didn't watch from the window, I didn't need to. Weeks passed. Life crept back in slow motion. I went back to work. I started running again, early mornings before the city woke up. The air was cold and clean, and with every mile I felt a little more like myself. People asked about him. I told them the truth in the simplest form. We're done. No drama, no story, just a full stop. One evening, scrolling through social media, I saw a photo someone had tagged him in. He looked the same, but smaller somehow. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Mia was nowhere to be seen. I scrolled past without hesitation, and that tiny act felt like reclaiming something invisible. My therapist once told me closure doesn't always arrive with an apology. Sometimes it's just the moment you stop needing one. I think I finally understood what she meant. Months later, I ran into him by accident. It was at a friend's birthday dinner, crowded restaurant, music low enough to talk but loud enough to pretend you didn't hear someone call your name. He spotted me first. "Hey," he said, tentative. I looked at him. Really looked. The face I once knew better than my own now felt like a stranger's. "Hey." We made small talk. Weather, work, harmless topics built on eggshells. Then he said, "You look good." I smiled politely. "I am good," he nodded, trying to keep it casual. "I heard you moved into a new place." "Yeah, closer to the park. I like the quiet." He hesitated. "I'm glad you're okay." And for once, I believed him. But that didn't change anything. The part of me that used to ache for his approval had gone quiet. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. When I got home that night, I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the balcony. The city lights flickered below, cars moving like tiny pulses of life. I thought about how different everything felt. Not better every second, but real. Freedom isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's walking into your own space and realizing no one's waiting to tell you what version of yourself is allowed to exist. A year later, Mia reached out. Out of nowhere. A long, awkward message on social media. She apologized. Said she hadn't known the full story, that Ryan had told her we were basically done. She said she was sorry for showing up that night. I typed, "It's fine. I wish you well." And I meant it, because I wasn't carrying that bitterness anymore. Sometimes I still think about the party, the music, the laughter that died mid-song, the weight of my own footsteps on the way out. People say walking away is easy, but it's not. It's 1,000 tiny deaths before the first breath of relief. But that first breath was worth everything. One afternoon, my sister and I went back to the same bar where Ryan and I had our first date. I hadn't been there since. She ordered the same drink he used to get, laughed, and said, "Can you believe how far you've come?" I looked around. The lights, the chatter, the smell of citrus and memory, and smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I can." Because I had. Not just from him, but from the version of me who thought love had to hurt to count. I'll never forget that night. The words, the look on his face, the exact sound of the door closing behind me. He thought he was giving me an ultimatum, but he accidentally gave me my freedom. When someone tells you to be cool or it's over, believe them. They've already shown you who they are. I was cool. Cool enough to hand over the past, walk out into the night, and never look back. And somehow, in the quiet that followed, I found something better than love. I found myself.